Hi everyone. I thought it was about time I show my face on the channel. I have been pondering for a while how I can approach sharing, I suppose, my spiritual journey and my path and my beliefs on the channel without going into a forever long video. It's such a wide, it's something that could blow wide open and just I could talk about forever. But so I've been really been struggling with it. However, I found the trad witch tag and thought it might be a good way to compress all the details. So today we're doing the trad witch tag. I will link the original video in the description and everything, and all the questions and anything that I mention, I suppose, links to anything I mention. So the first question is, what kind of craft do you practice? This has changed throughout the decades. Currently, I would definitely consider myself primarily a folk witch, a solitary folk witch at that. I have practices in shamanic healing and energy work and divination, but primarily my practice is focused around veneration of the ancestors and is, I would consider, like low magic. Throughout the years, I have come to acknowledge that I am definitely aligned with the record keepers and the knowledge seekers, and I really value holding space for what has come before us and what has paved the paths towards our current experience and situation. And that has come through for me in many different aspects of my experience and existence. It comes through in my work, holding, not holding space, but delving into the provenance of objects, the tools that I use, the work that I do, whether it's design-based or spiritual. I really do have a affinity with the ancestors of land, of blood, of experience, and that is, I suppose, the focus of my practice, and then everything else surrounds that. That's like the baseline. What paradigm, faith, or philosophy informs your craft? So definitely animism. Again, the provenance and the story of animal, vegetable material, whatever it is. Also elemental. I work with the elements every day in everything I do. It is a constant observation and conversation for me. And I really enjoy working with the elements and being able to reference them in my own body, externally, in my cooking, in my craft. Elemental connection is probably first and foremost. I suppose I would consider myself polytheistic, but again, primarily ancestral. I view the deities as beings of balance, so I'm not going, they both have light and dark aspects. I will never look at a deity in one light alone. I feel like that is a reflection of our human experience, and they're beings of balance for me. They're more like, they take on a more of an archetypal role. I also hold a lot of psychological awareness. My husband studies psychology, and I suppose it does inform my thoughts and opinions and practice. So there's that as well, though I wouldn't say that I'm based in that, but I do have an understanding of psychological connections and how they relate to intuition and our spiritual experience. So what cultures is your practice rooted in? My practice, I suppose, well, in the past sort of decade, my Romany lineage from my father's side I've really developed that and made waves to decolonize that as much as I can for myself and for my children and for my family. Um, I'm aware that I have a lot of Nordic heritage and Celtic heritage, but my father's family, I suppose the most influential aspect of cultures and practices within my family was the Romany space. They were also Roman Catholic as well. Not that I've taken that on, but I do have a respect for it, as I do all religions. Um, I also have an education in Wicca, as I think most people do from um, from my years. It was sort of the first thing that I dove into when I was a teenager, and it helped me to realize that there was more intuitive practices, spiritual practices outside of deity veneration that came with, or deity devotion that came with the Roman Catholic faith that I was very much aware of, and Christianity. My mother was Church of England. So, the Christianity beliefs were quite heavily forced upon me in school, and I was very much aware of them, and I just knew from the word go that it wasn't something that was for me, and it's not that I didn't believe in it, I didn't connect with it. It felt forced. So my jumping feet first into Wicca in my teenage years, it was something that allowed me to open the doors up to other paths. I also have roots in Slavic shamanism and Buddhism, but I sort of consider myself to exist in a space where they all overlap. I don't know how I would answer to naming my faith apart from it being my own. How long have you been practicing and how did it all start? So obviously this is the bit that could go on forever and ever. I'm referring to my notes as well, sorry, because I sort of had to pull this apart of what I wanted to share and what I didn't want to share, and what was meaningful to my work and for other people, what was beneficial for others to know. So yeah, my family heritage and the process of decolonizing the various practices that were in play during my upbringing has really informed everything going forward. I was aware of the practices, although I wasn't aware at the time of them being spiritual. It was just something that happened and that was. For a large part as well, if I had ever called or not, named any of those practices in front of my family as magical or spiritual, not necessarily spiritual, but definitely if I had mentioned the word magical to them, they would have not like that. But again, that's the colonization of the way of life that has had centuries of being made to fit into an existence that wasn't their own. So, as I said, I am still, and that is a process that I will still endeavour to unravel, because I would like to leave those doors open for the future generations of my family, for them to be able to acknowledge those practices if they feel that it suits them. So those practices have always been in my family from my childhood, although they weren't considered spiritual or magical at the time. They were just, things that happened. Obviously, from there, I went into witchcraft and wicca during my early teens. That opened the doors for me to feel out what worked for me and what didn't. I must say I didn't completely feel comfortable in the Wicca traditions. I felt like it was very performative and very forced. There was a lot of ritual and ceremony, and again, I felt like low magic was the thing. The folk crafts was more of my vibe, more fitting for me and how I saw the world and how I connected with the world and the elements. So those practices really I was learning them. I was going through the actions of them, but I hadn't yet figured out how they could work for me. So I've had, experience of that from my teenage years, but again, the process of me figuring everything out took me a long time. And then in my 20s, I completely abandoned spirituality altogether, following traumas and abusive connections that years later I can honestly say were the worst years of my life. For the most part, I lost my identity, my purpose, my path, and the ability to hold belief in anything. It was a very nihilistic, defeated sort of era for me. And I only found faith and strength and purpose when I was provided with a safe space to start reaching into those beliefs again. The crisis was ultimately a shutting down and a response to systemic patriarchal structures and influences. And my upbringing was very much one of, you toe the line, you do what you have to do, you fit in, you work, you sleep. And obviously in London, in my 20s, without guidance from anyone, it quickly became a very lonely and destructive path to follow. So I was able to build up my spirituality and my beliefs again once I had actually connected with my husband. And then obviously since then, we've had children. I have 2 boys, and it was a real 180 for me, because I went from being at the mercy of destructive patriarchy and toxic masculinity and abusive masculinity to being completely and utterly respected and held and loved and supported by a man and my son. So it was almost like the universe said, okay, now see the good side. And I'm so thankful for it. It needed to happen, because I can't imagine how I would have been left and the person who I would be today if that hadn't have happened. Not only my husband, but through my husband, I was able to connect with other beautiful, masculine people. and bring two beautiful boys into the world who, you know, as a mother of boys in waves of feminism, it's a lesson for many people, for all involved. So yeah, that was the crisis era. And then I found Buddhism, or should I say it found me, when I was preparing for my brain surgery in 2017. I had a real existential crisis when I was told that death is possible. Death could be on the cards, as is, you know, when I look back at it, death is on the cards every day. But when you have to sign a piece of paper as a waiver saying, you need to know what you're getting into, it really pushed me into boundaries of, oh my God, what if? And I received through the door a gift that had been, all I knew is it had been ordered on Etsy. I didn't know where it had come from, who it was to, but it certainly wasn't ordered by me. And it had come through to my address, and it was a little Buddha charm, like a keyring charm. And there was nowhere that I could return to sender. There was no sender address on the envelope. There was no order information in the envelope. It was literally just a charm in an envelope. And it prompted me to, I took that as a sign, and it prompted me to explore Buddhism. And I have to say, it absolutely got me out of my head and able to set things up for my family, so that in the best way that I could, in the best way that I was able to, in the event that for the event that I might not come back from the surgery. It wasn't, it was almost like a dummy's guide to Buddhism. I don't know what it was called. I'll put it in the link in the description. But I devoured the book and I reflected upon the lessons in the book every day, and it really got me through. And so Buddhism will always be part of my spiritual practice going forward, and it's something that I really hold similarly. It reflected my own values in a way that I couldn't explain or present them to anyone. So I was really happy about it felt like a relief when I came across Buddhism. And then obviously since then I've been involving my own practice with my sisterhood at the Tsogil Lamo Drayang Ling Temple, which is based on Mongolian shaman, or has a basis and foundation in Mongolian shamanism and Dzogchen Buddhism and drops of Wicca as well. So there. How long have I been practicing, and how did it all start? Now you know everything. A quick snapshot of everything. I can't. I need to stop because I'm going to just go off on one. Okay, what books and resources have you first, or did you first start with, and would I recommend them today? I first picked up. There was a shop called Pure Magic in my local city, which I frequented weekly, if not twice weekly. And the majority of the books on the shelf were Scott Cunningham at the time. I mean, we're talking like late 90s, early 2000s. I bought them all, I devoured them all. I still reference some of them, the associations and things today. I do not reference any of the ceremonial structures or the ritual structures at all. I feel like, although there are some prompts for list contents, I find Scott Cunningham's books very performative and almost like he's just going through the motions for the sake of it. It just didn't feel And this comes from experience as well. This comes from trial and error and me trying everything out. I am a big believer in trying things and seeing if they resonate. And Wicca, again, it didn't really resonate, although the elemental associations and how involved the elements are is something that obviously is just a baseline for me and will always be part of my own practice. The other one was Fiona Horn, who I met in the local bookshop. She came over and did a talk. I showed her my Book of Shadows at the time, which was probably just nonsense. And I was in awe of her. She was absolutely fabulous. I think as someone who walks the walk and talks the talk, I would recommend her. I wouldn't say that I practice her craft, but I would recommend her. People that are looking for insight into witchcraft and how it can be lived in a community, in a sisterhood or a brotherhood or a, general with others, alongside others. She really does have that experience behind her, and her writing's cool, and she sings, and she's just an awesome person. So yeah, I think Fiona Horn is a great go-to. She's also brought out the Magic of You Oracle as well recently. She's got a lot of experience behind her, and she's a beautiful person. What else? Resources at the time did I start with? I attempted to attend various psychic awareness groups in my late teens, only to be shown the door over and over and over again, and I couldn't figure out why they weren't allowing me to be part of their classes and tuition until someone said, well, you know that they're all very religious, they're Christians, which baffled me. I'm thinking, psychic awareness? What's that? Psychic awareness? How is that, connected to one religion? Surely anyone could practice psychic awareness. And it's because I was going in there and telling them I was pagan, and then I was quickly, shown the door after that. They just didn't want to know. So yeah, would I recommend psychic awareness classes? Maybe, if they're pagan and they're open to exploring and accepting everyone. I did attend one that was a spiritual, again, it was like based from a shop that was primarily like a crystals and candles shop. And I remember being the youngest there. They did various activities. We did psychometry, where we all took in an item and put them in a bowl and took one item out that wasn't ours, and then proceeded to tell each other the story of the object or what we saw when holding the object. It was something that a lot of them struggled with, and then it was my turn, and I remember just being really nervous because everyone was, I think, judgmental because I was so young at the time, but also I hadn't struggled with any of the activities before that one, and I was urged, carry on, come on, tell us what do you see, what do you feel, and I was able to, in detail, describe someone's house, the activities that they had carried out that morning, and the lady whose key it was, when I gave it back to her, walked out. Yeah, so there were a number of experiences, especially in the 90s, that prompted me to maybe keep my own practice to myself. It wasn't something that I was in situations like that over and over again, where whenever I was open about it, people weren't willing to hear about it, didn't want to know about it, and if they were ballsy enough, they would really give me a hard time or tell me their opinions about how they felt about my practice, and to some people saying, you're going to burn in hell and all this stuff, which is just disappointing, if nothing else. And the fact that that still happens today is just, again, massively disappointing given the era that we're in. Yeah, books and resources. I am the sort of person that recommends reading everything, consuming everything, like knowledge-wise, and going through a process of trial and error and seeing what resonates with you. It's okay. And it took me a while to realize this. And I think Racine, back in the day, when she began her channel, she was one of the people that sort of stood up and said it's okay to not take everything from a belief system. It's okay to follow multiple belief systems. It's okay to craft your own practice. There aren't enough people like that in the world, and there needs to be. I'm definitely someone that has crafted my own practice from various belief systems, from various cultures, from various practices. And for me, the magic exists in where they overlap, which I am going to touch on a bit later. So how has my practice or paradigm changed over the years, if at all? My practice has evolved from being a constant, what's the word I'm looking for? Effort into fitting into certain practices, belief systems, whatever you will call them, structures, and failing, to it being entirely driven by my own intuition and inner guides and my own guides. And when I say my guides, I refer to my animal energies that I work with, my ancestors, and a select few deities or archetypes, however you want to look at them. I feel like the awkwardness was required for me. I had to go through that awkward stage of constantly feeling like I was wearing someone else's shoes, or wearing a dress that doesn't quite fit, or it felt, that's what it felt like for a very long time. Whereas now my practice involves everything. It's something that I am constantly engaging with, whether I'm cooking or doing the chores or pulling cards or taking a bath or taking a walk. I am looking out for signs, which again was a big one from my Romany lineage, constantly looking for animal presences, the way things are laid out, the way things look, the way the wind blows, the weather, the smells, the sounds. It is something that I constantly engage with all the time. It's not something that ever switches off for me. My dreams, even when I'm asleep. Essentially I'm conversing now with the environment and with the energies at play constantly, and I will be driven and guided by that. I've practiced enough now to know when I'm being steered away, when I'm being encouraged, and the messages that I read through my experience as I walk through life. So but the awkwardness, I think I'm maybe just one of those learners where I have to, that's how I take on information, is by having to go through the process of knowing that something isn't right and not working, and it's not working for me. And that is also reflected in my design practice, in my crafting practice, in my reading practice, in the way that I learn and engage professionally, spiritually, personally, with others, with my guides. It's just how I assimilate information. But what it does allow me to do is really understand something in order to know whether it's right for me. So yeah, how has it changed? It's changed through experience, from awkward fitting to an intuitive, continuous conversation. What does your daily regular practice look like? What do you do on a regular basis? So my practice can look very different depending on what I'm doing every day and what I'm working on. If nothing else, I will always light a candle, which will be done in honor of my spirit guides, my ancestors, and for people. I might even light multiple candles for specific purposes, and I will pray for support for people that I know that are struggling. That is a minimum. I will light a candle. I always show thanks to the earth and the elements in some way, always. That might look like me walking around my garden and seeing what's grown and taking note of it and thanking the earth for its gifts. Or it might look like making offerings as I go on a walk, leaving seeds out for birds, things like that. So that can look different, but it will always happen one way or another. I will always pull at least one card. I'm a big divination nerd. I will either pull a card, or I will throw coins, or I will throw bones. Or if nothing else, I will look at, read from candle flame, or flame from the wood burner. One of those things will happen, that will happen. I will also try and meditate and journey, but that happens in the moment and it's not necessarily ritualized. If I feel called to do that, I will. If I don't, for whatever reason, this year's been it's been a difficult year, so it doesn't always happen. Another thing that will happen is a cleansing every day without fail. That's obviously happens in and around my shower routine or bath routine, depending on the day. I will also engage with, but not every day, spiritual creations, divinations for other people, artwork that I'm inspired to make, and writing. So part of my professional practice is calligraphy, and writing is a big one for me, for record keeping, for note taking, for writing out things for remembrance. They are all part of my daily/weekly practice. Are there any aspects of your craft that you need to keep secret? In your opinion, is secrecy important in witchcraft? Yes. Secrecy is very important for me. I believe it is for others as well. I'm a firm believer in keeping things close to your chest, especially when they are in progress. I'm also not one to I hate gloating. I think it's vile. I will only share information about my practice if it is of benefit to someone at the time. So I might say something like, have you tried this? I found that it's worked for me in the past. Perhaps it might open you up to this or that. But other than that, my practice is very, very private. I believe in energy. energy work is a big one. And I believe in the culmination or the building of energy. So mala beads is a huge one for me, because obviously as you meditate and use them every day, they are, excuse me, they are holding and building the energy that you are putting out into the world. I think the secrecy thing for me as well it's not that I don't want to share. I'm happy to share with the right people that hold a certain level of respect and experience in what, not in what I practice, but in a similar way in their own experience and their own practice, and they're able to meet me on a certain level, then I'm happy and open to share things. But I still won't share things that are in progress, unless it is a situation where the more people involved, the more powerful it will be. So, for instance, there have been worldwide efforts in praying or spellcasting or meditation to help with huge world problems. The fires in Australia, the war in Gaza, things like that. I am a firm believer of community effort to build energy and redirect the energy that is in play. So unless it's something like that, if it's more personal, then no, I won't share that. I don't know if I have much more to say on it. No, I won't share. If it's someone that is eager to learn, then I will share, maybe do things with them, but there will still be times where I won't share with anyone. The only exception to the rule with me is I also don't really like people touching my spiritual items, and even some of the things in my house. My house is my altar. It is a dedicated space where my family and I work on raising energy to support and manifest our dreams and our hopes and our will and our desires. It's also a place where we actively work on transmuting negative energies. And I genuinely view my whole house as an altar, and as such I am quite particular about who comes in and in what way they enter the space and for what reason they enter the space. So the exception to the secrecy rule and the touching things rule in particular are my sons. And even then, one of my sons holds a lot more reverence and meets me at a level of absolute respect, whereas the other one's more like, oh, cool, what's this? So, one will be supervised, whereas one won't be supervised. My husband obviously knows a lot, but not everything. Not if I am working on creating or changing energies around something for our family, I might talk about it briefly, but the ins and outs of it will still stay with me, because I think they're coming from a personal space of that it's a personal weaving. And because I work intuitively, I can't always outline how I'm going to go about what I'm trying to achieve. So, and I'm also not open to, because of the intuitive way I work, I'm not open to, I suppose, not that I would receive it from my husband, but opinions or viewpoints, because then I overthink things and then I don't necessarily flow how I want to flow. So multiple reasons for secrecy, not necessarily secrecy, but privacy. What are some of your favourite tools that you use regularly? I use all my decks regularly. I use drums. Can you see them? No, I've got 2 drums on the wall here. I use mala beads. I use candles. And I constantly reference the elements. So water, salt or earth, fragrance for air, flame from candles or from the stove. They are my go-tos. Herbs from the garden, dried flowers from the garden. I do have things that have been found in nature that I hold dear and that have got a place in my garden or on my altars around the house. Most of them have been picked up and given to me by my son when he was a lot younger. There are another couple that I have that are from my eldest, again, when they were a lot younger. And I have a bit of a, I suppose, how can I put this? I have a bit of a disparity between taking from the earth, or there's a belief that I have that I don't think you should take anything from the earth without permission or without knowing that you are okay to do so. And even then, you take the bare minimum. But with children, and I'm talking 3, 4, 5, 6, if a child goes to a beach and is genuinely intrigued by a shell or a stone, or you're walking along a river and they see something that they are intrigued by and that are fascinated with and captivated with, then I think that's an exception. The reason for me that's an exception is that, first of all, I want to prompt and promote natural environmental engagement without being destructive. Obviously, if a child is being destructive, then it's a hard no, and we will discuss that. But if my child came to me and said, look what I've got, what's happened to it? Why is it like this? Don't you think it's cool? Or whatever. And they don't leave it, they bring it home, then I feel like that is a push, that is an environmental universal prompt for that child to have that thing, to have that object. So I do have a few objects like that around my home that I will keep, that hold memories and are very dear to me, but I don't actively pick up and take things home without, prior permission, and a good, long, hard talk with myself over whether I need it, whether I should have it, whether it can be spared, the effects it's going to have on the environment if I do take things like that. So favourite tools, primarily those. I'm trying to think if there's anything else off the top of my head. Weaving is a big one, physical weaving. I started off with macrame. I went across to mala beads. I really do enjoy, I knit, I crochet. I really do enjoy the physical weaving of threads. And I really like to put intention into that as well. So that's also a thing, knotting, I suppose, not magic. What books or resources would you recommend to newbie witches interested in your kind of craft? My kind of craft is personal and unique to me and has come from my exploration in multiple relevant cultural practices that I have explored, read about, researched, engaged with, tried, practiced, and I have found that I happily exist in the space where they all overlap. One of the things, so my biggest thing is read everything, open yourself up to everything, allow yourself to be guided to practices that resonate with you. I think every religion, belief, or myth should be met with reverence, respect, and honor, even if you're just reading a book about it. And as such, there are religions and practices that I have read about, that I have researched, that I haven't taken from. One of the ones that I love I love the Polynesian myths. I read about them, I respect them, but they don't resonate with me, and they're not meant to resonate with me because I'm not of that culture. I don't have that lineage. It's fascinating, it's beautiful, but what I will do in that situation, for instance, if there is a deity such as, I don't know, let's take Isis, for example, the Egyptian goddess. If you are really being called to a deity like Isis, you can also find her myth and her energy in other deities from other cultures. So she holds a very similar energy to Venus from the Roman pantheon, to Aphrodite, from the Greek myth. For me, going back to what I was saying earlier, deity energy can be viewed, if it's viewed through an archetypal lens, you are more likely to find similarities throughout different cultures, and then hopefully in a culture that is relevant to you. So yeah, the cultural appropriation, I'm strongly against cultural appropriation, but I'm also a fan of exploring and finding where religions and belief systems overlap, and where they are similar and where they are different. That is something that I find endlessly interesting and always will. Joseph Campbell's book called Myth opened me up to that one. It primarily changed the way that I view and connect with deity, but his vast knowledge allowed him to present belief systems and myths throughout many, many different religious practices and belief systems, from folk laws to big, all-encompassing religions, and to really zoom out and have a bird's eye view on all of them, and then see where the similarities were, see what humanity, in our experience of our existence, walking in this existence as human beings, what we are all trying to relate to, or the energies we are all trying to resonate with. So that is a fantastic book, although it is not an easy book, and it will prompt I think it can very easily prompt a mental block / crises. It did for me. I had to overcome it. I had to keep reading, and it really made me review where I sat on my beliefs. But that's a life-changing read. It was for me anyway. The other thing that I would say is to really work on your personal values, not the social structures, not the values that are socially accepted. I'm not talking about the laws or the political sort of opinions out there. I'm talking about you as a human being on this earth, what your personal values are, and work on those, because once you have those nailed, you can then come at learning or exploring spiritual belief systems that are going to work in alignment with what you hold dear, what you are trying to achieve, where your boundaries are. That was a big one. So yeah, I think that if you are exploring different spiritual pathways, actively working and holding true and steady to your personal values, it should be a primary focus, and provides a very good baseline for you to work from as far as engaging with different energies, deities, practices. Other than that, research, test things, engage with things, and see how they fit with you personally. I am now going to review this video because I've got a worry that it's going to be very waffly and long. I don't even know how long I've been sat here chatting. 51 minutes. Okay, sorry peeps. However, I am hoping that it's allowed me to come across in a way, or it's allowed me to push across where I stand on spirituality and how you might be able to process my offerings, see where my offerings are coming from, basically, whether that be a video or whether that be a reading or whether that be spiritually aligned or inspired artwork that I make. You can now see who it's coming from and where I sit on the grand scheme of the spiritual spectrum. It's been a long one. If you've stayed this long, thank you. I appreciate you so much. And yeah, I look forward to doing a few videos soon.